Okay. So we'll wait a little bit so that our viewers can log in. Right, so I think we can start now. Good evening, my dear fellow. Everyone is having the time of their Saturday during this final month of 2020. It has been an extra turbulent year for everyone, and there has been a stop to all of our physical activities and due to the quarantine. And despite being distant from each other, the youth movements and activists remain active in one way or another. So this gives room to an exciting and creative approach to raise public awareness on social issues. And for Why Not Start team would like to invite you to tune in for a different feature today for webinars and to discuss one of the burning issues of all time, climate change and environmental issues. So may I, from the Why Not Start team, welcome you all to our Start Convo Road to Net Zero. And before we start, Why Not Start team would like to make some disclaimers. The event is for non-profit purposes. The information contained in the web and related materials are not intended to constitute advice of any kind or the rendering of consulting or other professional services. The opinions expressed in the webinars are those of speakers only and not necessarily represent the view of Why Not Start or any other organizations and body. The event will be recorded and the content of the recording of the event remain a property of Why Not. And now let's the Start Convo begin with the road to net zero. So let's start a little bit about how we can tackle the environmental issues, rather not an individual missions, it's an universal missions. It's for everyone and not just anyone. And so with such ideas in mind, the United Nations passed out the Paris Agreement in 2016, and it was an effort in addressing climate change. It tried to limit the emissions and adaptations and finance. So tonight will be specifically discuss the climate change in Southeast Asia, the net zero emission targets in the region. My name is Ngọc from the Why Not Start team, and I'll be your host tonight. Why Not Start is a branch of Unified Network of Towns focusing on educational content and of creating nonprofit projects and raising social awareness. There will be more to come from Why Not Start team, so please stay tuned with us. And coming to our events today, there are two amazing guest speakers from different countries of Southeast Asia. So let's welcome them. First up, how about we have a quick introduction from our guest speakers? How about we start with Ms. Russell Morales?
All right. Thank you, Ngok, for that introduction and for welcome everyone. Hello for those who are watching us tonight, and thank you for giving us your time to learn more about different climate and environmental issues. By the way, my name is Rosal Morales from the Philippines. I'm a climate reality leader and a mentor, and was trained by the then Vice President of the United States, Al Gore. And I'm also a community development worker. I use parliamentarian, but overall, my work really revolves on and focuses on converging the youth that also advocates for social and climate justice, like the organizers tonight.
Oh, thank you so much, Miss Morales. Our activities in Philippines seems to be very, very active, and that is really amazing. I hope we will have some very deep insights today. Thank you. And another guest speakers for tonight will be a guest from mainland Southeast Asia, a country called Vietnam. So please welcome the representative of SASA team, Mr. Chien Lê. Yes, Mr. Chien, please give us a quick introduction. Mr. Chien, can you introduce again? Because due to some technical issues, your microphone is not connected, I think. Okay, so due to some technical issues, may I introduce Mr. Shinley on his behalf? Yes, okay. So, Mr. Chien is the founder of Sasa Team Marine Animal Rescues, based in Da Nang, Vietnam, which is the central regions of Vietnam. And Sasa Team is a marine life activist. They focus on rescuing whales and dolphins and turtles in the coastal regions of Da Nang, Vietnam. And they also aim to regenerate the seagrass bed and other marine life environment in Da Nang area. So please welcome our two amazing guest speakers today. This is really amazing. And because our viewers and our guest speakers both come from Southeast Asia and many countries of Southeast Asia, so the event will be conducted in both English and Vietnamese for that purpose. So thank you. So now let's start kick in to our content of the events today. We do have some real activists, environmental activists in the house for the events. So how about you share your views on the climate situation in Southeast Asia, particularly in your countries for now? Ms. Morales, would you like to start first?
Yeah, yeah. All right. You can just call me Rosal.
Oh,
So
okay.
actually here in the Philippines, yeah. All right. So Philippines is actually very vulnerable to hazards that are brought about by climate change. In 2019, according to the Global Peace Index, we're one of the countries in Southeast Asia that is really vulnerable. And the United Nations even ranks the Philippines as the third most vulnerable country in the world to climate change, thanks to a combination of both natural exposure and also poverty. And then for a long time, particularly Philippines is vulnerable to extreme weather, but in the recent years, the country has suffered from even more violent storms like Typhoon Haiyan, and on the average, about 20 tropical cyclones enter the Philippine waters each year, with 8 or 9 making landfall. And over the past decade, these tropical storms have struck the nation more often and more severely because of climate change. And then, actually, recently, the Philippines has been devastated by back to back typhoons, namely Typhoon Kinta, Rolly, and Ulysses. And this has brought more than 12 billion agricultural damage that affected farmers and fisher folks, and have made marginalized sectors in the community more vulnerable to different intersectional challenges that is brought about by the climate crisis. And the thing is, the most of the flood that was brought about by the back-to-back typhoon recently, it just happened actually in November, was caused by exacerbated and was exacerbated more by the deforestation caused by illegal logging in the nearby forest. So that's the situation here in the Philippines.
Okay, thank you for your sharings. It seems that the deforestation really worsened the situation of greenhouse emission, right? And
Yes.
but with that, in combination of tropical rains, does that mean it will affect or somehow counterbalance the emissions, or still the situation is in very negative ways?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
I mean,
Um, is
with
will deforestation or
yeah,
um,
the lacking of forest is actually worsening the gas emission, the greenhouse gas emission, right? So
yes.
with yes, definitely, and but with that a combination to tropical rains and storms, do you think that it will counterbalance the greenhouse emission?
Um, the way I'm getting the question is, will the deforestation counterbalance the greenhouse emission? Is that right? Sorry.
Yes.
Oh, it will actually worsen it because we need more trees to actually uh, offset. So it means that the more that we deforest, or the more deforestation happens, the more that we actually release carbon out of the atmosphere, and the higher the tendency that the carbon, and a big part of our GHG or greenhouse gases is actually because that we don't have any more like carbon sinks such as the trees that limits the carbon from going out of the atmosphere and trapping heat into our planet. So on the other hand, it means that we need actually reforestation to counterbalance such effects. So if we want to lessen the effects of the climate crisis, we really have to plant more trees. So we have to reforest.
Okay, thank you for your sharings. Actually, in Vietnam, we suffer quite a similar situation. And with the lack of forest and increasing heat, storms have becoming more extremes. So, Mr. Chien Lei, Mr. Chien, from your perspective of a Vietnam citizen, how do you think the situation of storms and marine life have been worsened by climate change? Can you reconnect your mic? Yes, we can hear you well.
Okay, so the situation in Vietnam is very bad, but I think we a bit lucky than Philippines, bit more luckier than Philippines. So to be more detailed, I will give you guys some example of very near climate event happened just a few months ago. So based on the report of I know AI, uh, let me check the full name of the organization. But they are in charge in monitoring the open water temperature based in US. So the record show that in September of this year, the the ocean water temperature was super high. So in my experience, we experienced the 31 Celsius degree under 10-meter deep. So that was the reason for the four storms coming in the next month. That was the October. So I think based on the geography, we is a bit more luckier than Philippines. And that storm, that four storms was almost destroy every reef on the coastal line of central of Vietnam. And for one more thing, we need to be very clear here is we used to think about the lung of this planet is the Amazon. We used to have that term,
Yes.
but it's not exactly right. So the Amazon forest is just one of the lung in this planet, and the fact is, in the science side is it's a small little lung. So we have a lot of lungs in this planet that help our planet cool down and make the climate run as it should be. For example, the seagrass bed. So we talking about the deforestation. Uh, that term need to be expanded. That the deforestation of the it's not just the land forest. It's also the underwater seagrass bed, the mangrove, and one more one more lung. It's a very important lung. Is the coral reef. The coral reef is the biggest and the richest ecosystem on this planet. It have to it's act. Of course, it's act like a CO2 sink, and it's also run the CO2 routine. So, for example, you guys throw in the coral reef, the reef, a piece of organic stuff. So that's organic will be break down into 1,000 uh, particle. It be eaten by 1,000 kind of animal before it become green gas. Before that carbon become green gas. So that circle is 100 times to 1,000 times more complexity than the forest. So we need to very clarify here that it's not just we don't have just only one lung in this planet. We have a lot of lungs.
Yes, thank you very much for your sharing, Mr. Tien. You mentioned very fascinating facts is that deforestation should be expanded to not just on forest, but also to underwater forest, right? So, as you mentioned that, how do you think the problem of extra waste dumped into the oceans have worsened the underwater ecosystems and specifically the forest underwater?
Okay, to be clear, that what I mean is it's not the forest. We cannot talk about like that with the science term. So
Yes.
what I'm trying to say is the ecosystem. So the
Yes.
ecosystem is the system of life. So we have many system of life on Earth. The forest is a very obvious example, and the coral reef is the richest and the most complexity. And then we have the seagrass bed, and we have a deep sea, and we have open water. We have a lot. And to answer your question, it is the very big question. This is a very big
Yes.
question. But what we throw to the water. So I will separate it into two things that we used to throw to the ocean. It's the organic stuff and it's the non-organic stuff. So the non-organic stuff here we can be understand as uh, chemical, and it's also the waste of the industrial waste, and also yeah, the big problem now is plastic waste.
Yes.
So
Yes.
come back to the very first element is the organic stuff. So when we throw the organic stuff to the water, is it okay? Actually, it's not okay. The nature they have its own way to run. If we throw, it's like we have a pack of dog. They have their own land. They have their own food, and they survive by that. It's natural. But we throw in a piece of meat, or we throw in something that make that natural behavior break down or more intense. That could be something that we cannot control, and that could be bad, and that could be good, but we don't know. That's something that we cannot control, but it's still happen. It's happened everywhere. All the trash is come to the ocean. Organic, non-organic, it doesn't matter. Now it's come onto the ocean. And for the non-organic side, with industrial waste and the chemical, we don't have much information. We don't have enough machine, don't have enough laboratory to examine in vast mass long of the beach of the ocean, and it's also the depth, and it's very hard to do it now. And I think that we in this conference we should focus on the plastic waste. So what is the plastic waste involved to the climate change? Um, we can talk about where it's from. It's from the oil, so it's easy to understand. But it's not just the industry of the oiling, uh, of the fuel. It's also another side of that. So the industry of the oiling is easy to understand. It's, it destroyed the ocean. It destroy everything on land. It destroyed the forest. That's what they do. They're mining, the oiling. Yeah, it's, and we talk about the other side that uh, we have a lot of plastic is now under water. So there is two information. The first thing is plastic is the holding heat material. So it's like you put a rubber under the sun and you feel it. It's crazy hot, right? So
Yes.
underwater is the same. It keep the heat. So with mass amount of it, it keep the energy of the sun, and it's make the ocean water longer to cool down. That's why we suffer the heat wave. That's why we suffer the ocean water temperature rise so hot on the September. And there's another information. So the plastic trash, including microplastic, they keep it. They are the material, they keep it. Uh,
Yes.
and another information. So The plastic waste underwater. What is? What are they? They are the single-use plastic bottle. They are the plastic bag. They are the single-use plastic. Is it all?
Yes, they are
No.
very fascinating facts for that. So, um,
Oh, I need more.
yes, okay.
That's not all. That's not all. It's just the half of the plastic now is underwater. There is something that will
Mm.
be amaze you guys. No, no, not amaze. There's something will be surprise you guys that 50% of the plastic underwater now is the ghost net. Have you ever heard about that?
That is a relatively new terms. Yes.
This is the ghost net. Ghost net is the mean is the abandoned net thrown away
Mm.
or be lost by the fishermen or the fishing industry. So for 1,000 years, since we learn how to fish, so it was there. It was underwater because there were a lot of reasons. They lost the net. They have to cut the net. Something a lot of reasons. But
Yes.
don't misunderstand that the fishermen they don't throw away the net. It's very expensive. But for 1,000 years now, the ghost net is underwater. They take about 50% to 50% of the plastic trash underwater now. So it's not just a single-use plastic. It's not just a plastic bag. So this is the new awareness.
Ah, okay.
And if I may
This,
add to Mr. Chen, if it's okay,
yes.
actually, as you've said, the Philippines and Vietnam are the same in terms of like land problem and the tropicals. The hazard that is brought about by different typhoons is actually the same also in terms of the marine debris, because actually Vietnam and the Philippines are also like one of the major contributor of single-use plastics. That's also the reason why, actually, as a youth parliamentarian, we champion the regulation of single-use plastics here in the Philippines. Of course, it's really hard to enforce, especially that Vietnam and also the Philippines is still in the uh, is still a developing country with the economy really dependent on growth of consumers that don't have much um, access to alternatives to single-use plastics. Therefore, I'm not sure with Vietnam, but the problem of the single-use plastics here in the Philippines is also hard because from the source, we still have a sachet economy, which means that people who consumes a lot of small plastics rather than buying in bulk and saving or using lesser plastics. So it's hard.
Mm, that is some very interesting facts on the situation of the two countries. Um, I would like to mention a little bit about the COVID-19 since due to that reason, we have to come to a stop like temporarily in all kind of industrial activities. So how do you think this have affect the climate change situation in your countries? Because due to this stop, a lot of industry activities need to stop for a while, right? Yes. How
Um,
does that take in
All right, I'll
Philippines?
start first. Actually, here in the Philippines, the shutdown or the quarantine could have been a good opportunity for us to, reduce global emissions. However, um, it's also a double-edged sword because although that the industries have stopped and therefore also our emissions have been uh, slower than usual when the business as usual is is there. um, it can also be hard because once the economy is back to the way it was before, we can just emit the same or even more than we emitted before. So, this quarantine can be a springboard to launch transformational policies aimed at lessening the society's dependence on fossil fuel industry and other other industries that are harmful to the environment. However, and then actually, but in the Philippines, there are also post-pandemic economic rescue proposing that we actually shift to green recovery measures. But however, since this will be a transition, hopefully that it lessens our pollution, both air and plastic and other kind of pollution. But it's really a double-edged sword, and although like we pause, if we don't change our ways, or if time is not on our end, we might just go back again to emitting a lot of greenhouse gases and polluting our waterways again.
Yes. So, what about the situation in Vietnam? How have the stop due to COVID-19 affect the situation?
Yeah, of course, firstly we can clearly see that it's affect a lot on the tourist industry. So of course we cut off a lot of the green gas due to the travel. But in my point of view, um we we need to work harder. Um, in As I mentioned before, in September, we got a heat wave. Uh, that is the highest temperature of the ocean water in the 15 year. Yeah, and it's caused uh, most of the coral reef in the central Vietnam bleaching, and it's also happened in Philippines. And with the mass bleaching like that, we losing our most effective climate machine. So even now, if we can reach the zero net emission target,
Yes.
if we don't restore our natural ecosystem, such as um, our forest, our coral reef, and most in this area, this is the most important in the cut off the green gas and build up the CO2 sink is the secret bed. So in case that it could be new for you guys, but it's already been announced in 2018 in science world that the secret bed they got the biomass uh, from eight from 2 to 8 times more than forest. So the amount of oxygen they can produce by the photosynthesis is 8 times more than like our forest. Of course, it's the same area, same space, same. Okay, so and
Yeah.
the ability to keep the CO2 uh, underwater is 2 times than the forest. So
Okay.
if we don't restore our ecosystems, we
Yes.
cannot survive, even we reach the zero net target.
The net zero emission.
Net zero.
Yes. Yes. So this means that with all these short-term effects, we will need very long-term planning, not just on net zero emission, but also on the entire ecosystem on the whole. It will move in a system like that. Am I understanding that correct, Mr. Chien?
Of course, it takes a long time, but mm, mm, as I said before, that we have science who study and we got the new research, and it's work based on our research that to be able to replant or restore a forest, it takes you from 50 to 300 years to fully restore. But it takes you about 1 month to have edge forest like that if you do with the seagrass bed. So
Mm.
just 1 month because the biomass underwater is huge and the speed of growing of the seagrass is very fast. So you just need to plan uncigarette bed with the same size of the forest. That means you have 8 forest already. And the biomass they provide is just in 1 month. So, but we have to do everything at the same time. We need to stop the deforestation. We need to restore the forest. We need to restore our coral reef, which is the source of the underwater life. And of course, we need to plant the seagrass as fast as we can. So our ocean will cool down. That means our atmosphere will cool down.
Yeah, I also agree with Mr. Chen. I think what's the emphasis here is how all our efforts should be simultaneous. That's what I'm getting from you, Mr. Chen. Correct me if I'm right. But while we're having solutions on deforestation, which is really more focused on our forests on the land, Mr. Chen's I think mentioned that there are also actions that should be done underwater that should, and they go hand in hand to help each other. So yeah, I agree on that.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with you guys. It is true that
Oh, sorry. It seems like our
uh,
host has a little. And you're back? Okay, perfect.
yes, I'm back. So, with the targets of limiting the global warming down to 1.5 degrees Celsius, then how do you think the policies could change that? Because targets are just targets if nobody do anything to it, right? So, Mr. Chien, how do you think about these kinds of targets? And how do you think the policies could support that? Because as from the way I understand, then we will need very systematic change to that. And I'll now translate that into Vietnamese. Thưa anh Chiến, những cái thay đổi này về môi trường thì quả thật là nên làm, tức là một cách toàn diện về mọi mặt của hệ sinh thái, đúng không ạ? Nhưng mà điều đấy cũng và cái mục tiêu của Liên Hợp Quốc về cái chiến dịch net zero đó là giảm cái nóng lên toàn cầu xuống khoảng 1,5 độ C. Như thế thì nó là một cái mục tiêu, nhưng mà nếu như chúng ta không làm gì với nó thì nó vẫn chỉ là một cái mục tiêu thôi. Như vậy thì anh nghĩ là những cái chính sách và có thể có những giải pháp nào để đạt được mục tiêu đấy không ạ?
Firstly, I have to say that I work more in science, and I don't really work on the something like build up the policy or something like that. So it's very hard for me to say that what kind of policy or what policy should be like this or like that.
Yes.
But of course, firstly, our society is go by the law, and that is very very logic that I understand that we need to put more law on the environmental matter, environmental benefit, and in just my personal my personal thinking, my
Opinion,
personal thought
yes.
is the answer is not if we wait for the policy and wait for the law, maybe we been just like this sit here and talking 10 more years and nothing changed. So I think the answer is we are the answer. So the very first thing we need to fix is our lifestyle. We need to understand our CO2 footprint, and it is very simple thing that we say no to plastic. Or this Just reduce the plastic or reuse it. Reuse is the best. We cannot stop the plastic. It's not right. We need plastic, and um, we don't use the. We try not to use the exported stuff. We use the local stuff. It's very important because now we empty the sea. We empty the sea just to export. I think that Philippines and Vietnamese we face the same problem that we overfishing and we export it to the overseas with very cheap price and uh, we export to some place that they use our seafood or fertilize. Can you believe that? And we empty our nature just for import and export. This is the problem of the industrial. They program people to buy stuff, to buy more than we need, and to be able to reach the idea of the happiness. I don't know what to say, but it's a very small step, but it's huge. If billion people on Earth say no to plastic or try to use the local stuff or going vegan, it's very important, and it's we really really turning the table.
Um, yeah, if I may add, actually, just going back to the question as to how we can actually make sure that these policies may be like international policies, such as the Paris Agreement that was crafted, for um, based on the cooperation of a lot of states towards the net zero, or limiting um, our emissions, our greenhouse gases emissions. um, I think Mr. Chen was right in saying that we are the answer, but we have to clarify who are the we. And by we, it means the power of the people, those who are, because the leaders will come and go, those who drafted the legislation will come and go, but really the power resides on the people to implement it. And since I'm an aspiring environmental lawyer, that's actually my overall goal. I'll start entering law next year to start my journey on that. I agree that law and policies as a whole is very important, but we don't need to wait, because laws are just things to institutionalize already something that has changed on the ground. So I agree that it's I think Mr. Chen was trying to say is that change starts from the grassroots, because if and I really believe that, and I really think that the best law is the law that does not need to be enforced, because we already know that. So I agree that there's a need to also change a lifestyle, and maybe we're entering on the aspect of how can really the youth of the Southeast Asian nations be active and act in the area of climate change and or climate change advocacy and environmental protection. I wrote here that I'll probably say it by the end of this event. But since Mr. Chen provided the opportunity already that we share what can change, he said about lifestyle change and about how our society actually programs us to buy more and more and be consumerist in this society, and buying from international companies rather than supporting our local economy through just buying from small and medium enterprises. I agree on that. But what's important that he said actually is the fact that um, we need, or in my own word, the things that we should do is reconnect and resist. And that's everything that actually, I think that's how my climate activism, and that's what I will tell other youth to do. Reconnect is in a way a call for a cultural shift in how we individually and collectively view nature, because currently we view nature as a tool. It's just a utility, and it's separate from us. So we need to have a cultural shift to see and to have a deeper connection to nature, as so that we don't exploit it. And through that, we decide for the betterment of nature, although it's a hassle sometimes to change lifestyle and to also encourage others to do to change as well, because this changes will naturally also change institutions into or these changes will inspire other people to lobby to their government. So that's one. It's going back to the idea that humans are not separate from nature, so that we don't exploit nature. And second really is resist, which is resist development paradigms that compromises the climate and the environment, and pressure our governments or leaders or decision makers to prioritize climate justice through concrete actions. You've said earlier, Ngok, that policies sometimes are just in paper. And that is quite true. In the Philippines, we signed the Paris Agreement in 2015, but as of now, little changes are seen. We're still investing in coal, a lot of development paradigms, a lot of forests are being cleared away for big dams and all of that. So I think that's it. So to make sure that action is really happening on the ground, reconnect individually and collectively, but also resist development paradigms that are bad for us through lobbying, joining activists, being an activist, or organizing, such as what you're doing and why not currently, and then of course volunteer in organizations such as such as if you're in Vietnam, like Mr. Chen's organization, the SASA team, or why not? So
Thank you so much for your sharings. I think we are all on the same ground, is that systematic change need to start from our awareness and from the very small actions that we can do every day. I believe that the youth force of Southeast Asian and of each countries in Southeast Asia can be a very supportive role for the movement. So how do you think the youth can take action to this in climate change issues? How about we have a start with Rosal?
all right. So I think I answered
with
that
your
actually.
experience in
Yeah,
youth
I
movements,
answered.
I think you have a lot to share. Yeah.
No, I think Mr. Chen has a lot actually to share, because I think he's really on the ground. But since just to share a little bit on what are the concrete actions that the youth can actually do, as I've said earlier, aside from reconnecting, which is going back to your values, because I think that humans were not really born into this world, wanting to exploit. It's just that our current society,
Yes.
is based on that. So if we reconnect to our values, we go back to that. So one of and that is very introspective, but for more concrete actions, I think that once we already know the reason why we're here, as I've said, you can volunteer to different organizations, and such as Why Not, such as the SASA team of Mr. Chen. If you're in Vietnam, there's a lot of organizations that are catering to climate activism and climate change as a whole. You can search online on what organizations are close to you. But if you want to start your own, which is if there's no organization that exists in your community right now, I suggest that you start your own organization. So you can start you can start talking to your family, and what you learned tonight, you can tell them that, oh, did you know that we're polluting our marine our marine ecosystem, and just passing the information and the awareness around so that we can start caring. So, and that's what one small step that you can do. And then you can also talk to your leaders and lobby to them that to prioritize climate action, because the fact is, around the world, although we have net zero campaign by the United Nations to lessen our pollution, our greenhouse gases emissions, not all of the countries prioritize climate change. So we need more people to pressure the government and to say, this is our future and we want you to prioritize it through climate action. So that's one. You can volunteer in communities, or you can also pressure your government and to legislate and to act on these issues.
Yes, thank you. So that is one take for the youth to do with the climate change activities. So, Mr. Chien, how about you? What do you think the youth should do?
Mm, uh, in the view of an old man, mm, I will say that, uh, of course, I agree with everything that Russell says. You guys need to reconnect with your culture, and that's also is very very important that study more, and everything you need to make a decision based on the science. The information is just a piece of data being collected and being processed. It become information. It's not. It doesn't mean that it's right or it's wrong. So the the people or the people that decides right or wrong is us. So what I want to say is for the youth is study more and try to practice science, learn science, and if in the best case scenarios, uh, one of you can become the leader of the country with the term of the idea of the protect our own culture, protect our own nature. So that would be the best. So study more.
Yes, thank you. That is a really, really amazing perspective from the position of a scientist as you are. Well, thank you so much for sharing your opinions and your views on how we can do that, how the youth can do that uh, to affect, contribute to the climate change movement. And that question's actually wrapped up our Start Convo of tonight. And on behalf of the STAR team and our viewers, thank you so much for joining us today and share your diverse views on the topic of climate change and the environment. It was really fascinating, and I actually learned a lot, and especially with a lot of untouched areas on marine environment and marine debris contributing to the way to the net zero emission targets. And it's been a real pleasure for me as a individual and as the representative of Why Not Start team. So, and we would like to send out appreciation to you and to our valued viewers and fellows for tuning with us in today. So that is it for the event. We wish you a Merry Christmas and an upcoming Happy New Year. It has been the Start Convo Start team, and we'll see you in our future events. Thank you so much.